If you feel that everything around you has collapsed, that what once held up who you were has turned to rubble, this may be the most important moment of your life. And before we move forward, let me invite you to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Why? Because rebuilding yourself is not a one-time event, it's a journey. Every week we explore the depths of analytical psychology, spirituality and self-awareness in ways that unlock what lives hidden in you. In the pinned comment below and in the description, you'll find resources, recommended reading, and a community walking this same path with you. Now, as we were saying, though everything sounds like an ending right now, it's precisely here that something profoundly real can begin. What collapsed might not have been you at all, but the character you were performing, the mask you wore so long you forgot it wasn't your face. Jung understood this when his own world crumbled, when the structures he thought essential disintegrated. He didn't rush to rebuild over the ruins. Instead, he descended into them. He allowed the death of what was false, and from that darkness he emerged different, more whole, more legitimate, more free. This is the quiet map to begin again. There are no easy answers here, only process. And the first step is permission to descend, to feel the pain, the emptiness, the rage. Don't try to escape it, numb it, or rebuild in haste, just to silence the anxiety. Listen to the call of the unconscious, even when it arrives as symptom, dream, or despair. It's in the dark cave of not knowing that the genuine impulse of life is born. You've been taught to fear the void, but the void is where transformation breathes. Most people, when life collapses, immediately try to reconstruct what was. They grab at the broken pieces, trying to glue them back together, terrified of losing the familiar. But Jung's wisdom shows us something radically different. He invites you to sit in the wreckage, to ask not how to return to who you were, but who you might become now that the false has fallen away. This is not passive resignation, it's active surrender. It's the courage to stop defending a version of yourself that no longer serves you. And in that stillness, something stirs. The unconscious begins to speak. It sends you symbols in dreams, pulls you toward unexpected encounters, stirs emotions you've buried for years. This is not chaos. This is communication. Your psyche is trying to show you what you've denied, what you've exiled, what you've refused to see. Soon, the shadows emerge. The parts of yourself you've always rejected begin to surface. Your trauma, your destructive patterns, your hidden rage, your shame, your unmet needs. Jung called this the confrontation with the shadow. And yes, it will hurt. You'll see things about yourself you've avoided your entire life. You'll recognize the ways you've sabotaged your own happiness, the ways you've betrayed yourself to belong, the ways you've hidden to be loved. But here's the paradox. These fragments, when brought into the light, stop sabotaging you in silence. They stop controlling you from the depths. When you can look at your shadow without flinching, when you can say, yes, this too is me, integration begins. You stop being haunted by what you refuse to acknowledge. You reclaim the energy you've spent suppressing yourself. The shadow is not your enemy. It's the disowned part of your wholeness, waiting to come home. And this is where most people turn back. They touch the shadow and retreat. They feel the discomfort and decide it's safer to return to the ruins, to rebuild the same broken life, because at least it's familiar. But you didn't come this far to repeat the past. You came to be reborn, and rebirth requires that you let the old self die completely. Not in violence, but in acceptance, in grief, in release. Only then comes the third stage, re-emergence. Now, you don't reconstruct what fell. You build something entirely new, something unprecedented. You're learning to be yourself, without masks, without dependencies, without performing for approval. Your choices now become affirmations of the new self. You can say no without guilt. You can walk away from what drains you. You can cultivate relationships free of performance. You can seek purpose aligned with what truly matters to you, not what was imposed. You can see your own company as enough. This is the individuation Jung spoke of. The process of becoming who you actually are beneath the layers of conditioning, expectation, and survival. But be warned, this freedom you've just discovered can be deeply uncomfortable. Nothing guarantees it. Nothing makes it easy. You stand before the rarest and most dangerous question of all. Who do I choose to be now? Not who do others need me to be, not who I was trained to be, but who do I choose, freely, courageously, to become? Interrupt the compulsion to salvage the old ruins. Don't repeat past mistakes just because they're familiar. Use the rubble as raw material for what's being born. Yourself, stripped of characters, ready to experiment with an existence free of external scripts. And here's what no one tells you. The process is inconsistent. There will be relapses, back and forth movements, days when it seems impossible to rebuild anything at all. As important as persisting is recognizing that each fall is also an invitation. Don't rush the restart. Feel it. Welcome the emptiness. Let yourself learn from it. All haste is fear of feeling, but genuine growth demands time to mature. You'll want certainty. You'll crave a manual, a 5-step formula, a guarantee that if you do this, you'll get that. But life after collapse doesn't work that way. What you're building now is not a structure. It's a relationship with yourself, with your unconscious, with the mystery that moves through you. And relationships require presence, patience, and trust. When something finally rises in the new ground opened by ruin, even if insecure, even if small, celebrate it. Not for the result, but for the courage to stop lying to yourself. This is where true freedom lives. Living in alignment with who you are, not with what's expected. The collapse was only the beginning. What's essential is now available to you. You don't need permission. You don't need to justify. You need only to choose. And if you've come this far, make this instant a marker. Declare it. I'm beginning again. But before you rush forward, pause here. Understand that what you're experiencing, this death and rebirth, is not abnormal. It's not a sign that you failed. It's a sign that you're alive. It's a sign that your soul refused to keep pretending. Spiritually, this moment is sacred. Ancient wisdom traditions across the world speak of the dark night of the soul, the descent into the underworld, the initiatory death that precedes transformation. The mystics knew what Jung rediscovered through psychology. That you cannot become whole without first becoming nothing, that you cannot know yourself without first losing the false self, that the path to God, to truth, to essence, always leads through the valley of shadows. Sexuality, too, plays a role here, though it's often overlooked. When your life collapses, your relationship with desire shifts. Sometimes it vanishes entirely, as if your body has shut down in grief. Other times it intensifies, as if the life force is reminding you that you still exist, that you still feel, that you're still capable of pleasure and connection. Jung understood sexual energy not merely as physical, but as creative life force, libido in its deepest sense. It's the energy that builds, that seeks, that unites opposites. When integrated consciously, it becomes fuel for individuation. When repressed or acted out unconsciously, it fragments you further. As you rebuild, notice your relationship with desire. Are you numbing it? Are you using it to escape? Or can you meet it with curiosity, recognizing it as one more voice of the psyche, calling you toward wholeness? In this process, you may discover that what you thought was purely sexual longing was actually spiritual hunger. Or that what you labeled spiritual yearning carried erotic undertones. Jung's concept of the conjunctio, the sacred marriage of opposites within, suggests that spirit and body, thought and feeling, masculine and feminine, are not enemies but partners. Integration means honoring both. It means not choosing transcendence over embodiment, but weaving them together. And as you do this inner work, the outer world begins to shift. not because you've manipulated it, but because you've changed the lens through which you perceive it. Relationships that no longer fit fall away naturally. Opportunities that align with your authentic self appear. Synchronicities multiply, those meaningful coincidences Jung described, where the inner and outer worlds mirror each other. You begin to trust the process, not because it's comfortable, but because you've learned that discomfort is often the growing edge. But let's be honest, there will be moments when you doubt everything, when the pain feels pointless, when you wonder if you should have just stayed in the wreckage, numb and safe. In those moments, remember this: the fact that you're questioning means you're awake. The fact that you're feeling means you're alive. The fact that you're here, still searching, still willing to try, still open to transformation, means you haven't given up on yourself. And that, more than any insight or revelation, is the foundation of rebirth. Self-compassion, the willingness to meet yourself in all your brokenness and beauty with kindness. To say, I see you, I'm here, we'll figure this out together. Because the truth is, you're not alone in this. Every person who has ever truly lived has walked through their own collapse. Every mystic, every artist, every seeker has faced the void and chosen to continue. You're part of an ancient lineage of those who refused to settle for a half-lived life, who chose depth over comfort, who dared to ask, what if there's more? And there is more. More than you can imagine right now, more wholeness, more freedom, more aliveness than the character you were playing ever allowed. But you have to be willing to let that character die. You have to be willing to grieve what's lost. You have to be willing to sit with not knowing, with uncertainty, with the terrifying openness of becoming. This is the individuation process, not a destination, but a commitment. A lifelong practice of listening to the unconscious, integrating the shadow, honoring both spirit and body, choosing authenticity over approval. It's messy, it's non-linear, it's often lonely, but it's also the most meaningful thing you can do with your one wild life. So here's your quiet map. First, descend. Feel the collapse fully. Don't rush past the grief. Second, confront the shadow. Look at what you've denied and bring it into the light. Third, re-emerge. Build something new, something true, something aligned with who you actually are. And fourth, keep going. Because this isn't a one-time event, it's a spiral. You'll descend again. You'll face new shadows. You'll rebuild in new ways. And each time you'll go deeper, become freer, live more fully. The collapse was not the end. It was the clearing, the demolition of what was false to make space for what's real. And now, in this open space, you get to choose. Not once, but daily. Not perfectly, but sincerely. Who are you becoming? What matters to you now? What do you want to create with this one precious life? These aren't rhetorical questions, they're invitations, and the answers won't come from outside. They'll rise from within, from the same unconscious depths that called you into collapse. Trust that. Trust the process. Trust yourself. Because beginning again, despite everything, is still the most powerful choice you can make. Begin again. Still. Jung spoke of a phenomenon he called the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to hold tension between opposites until a third thing emerges, something new, something that couldn't exist without the conflict. When your life collapses, you're standing in that tension, between who you were and who you're becoming, between the past that's gone and the future that hasn't yet formed, between despair and hope, death and rebirth, breakdown and breakthrough. Most people can't bear this tension. They collapse one way or the other. They either cling to the past, trying desperately to revive what's dead, or they leap prematurely into a new identity, grabbing at anything that promises relief from the uncertainty. But the transcendent function requires that you stay in the middle, that you hold the opposites without choosing too quickly, that you let the tension build until something genuinely new can be born from it. This is uncomfortable. This is painful. But this is also where transformation happens. Not in the relief, but in the waiting. Not in the answer, but in the question. Not in the knowing, but in the willingness to not know. And here's what makes it even harder. The world around you won't understand. People will pressure you to move on, to get over it, to be yourself again. But you can't be yourself again because that self no longer exists, and the new self hasn't fully emerged yet. So you're in between, you're in the liminal space, the threshold, the gap between worlds. And this is holy ground. Anthropologists call it liminality, the state of being betwixt and between, no longer what you were, but not yet what you will be. In traditional cultures, this was recognized as a sacred time. Initiates undergoing rites of passage were separated from the tribe, stripped of their old identity, and held in the liminal space until they were ready to return transformed. We've lost this understanding in modern life. We've lost the rituals that honor transition. We've lost the elders who could say, "Stay here a little longer, the transformation isn't finished yet." So you have to become your own elder. You have to give yourself permission to be in transition without rushing it. You have to trust that this in-between space, as disorienting as it is doing something essential in you. It's dissolving the old structures. It's opening you to new possibilities. It's teaching you to live without the false certainties you once clung to. And in this liminal space, something remarkable happens. You begin to encounter what Jung called the self, the larger totality of who you are, beyond the ego's narrow concerns. The ego is the part of you that identifies with roles, achievements, relationships, the story you tell about who you are. When that story collapses, the ego feels like it's dying, and in a sense it is. But what's dying is only the limited version of yourself. What's being born is the deeper, truer, more expansive self. The self speaks in symbols, in dreams, in the pull of intuition, in the strange synchronicities that start appearing when you're paying attention. It doesn't give you a plan. It gives you hints, breadcrumbs, small invitations to follow a thread you don't fully understand yet. You might feel drawn to a book you've never heard of, to a conversation with a stranger, to a place you've never been, to a practice you've resisted. These aren't random. They're the self reaching out, guiding you toward what you need for the next stage of becoming. But you have to be quiet enough to hear it. You have to create space in your life for the subtle, the symbolic, the numinous. You have to stop filling every moment with distraction and busyness and let yourself be still, because the self doesn't shout. It whispers, and if you're too loud, you'll miss it. This is where spiritual practice becomes essential, not religion in the dogmatic sense, but spirituality as a lived relationship with the mystery that moves through you. Meditation, contemplation, prayer, journaling, walking in nature, creating art. Whatever practice helps you listen to the deeper currents beneath the surface noise. Jung himself turned to active imagination, a practice where he would enter into dialogue with figures from his unconscious, asking them questions, listening to their responses, learning from the wisdom that lived in him, but beyond his conscious control. You can do this too. You can sit quietly and ask, "What am I not seeing? What does this collapse want to teach me? What part of me is trying to emerge?" And then you listen, not with your thinking mind, but with your whole being. And what comes may surprise you, an image, a feeling, a voice that doesn't sound like your own, but somehow knows more than you do. This is the individuation process at work. This is the self guiding the ego toward wholeness, and it's not always comfortable. Sometimes the self asks you to do things the ego doesn't want to do, to leave relationships that feel safe but stifling, to pursue paths that seem risky or impractical, to honor parts of yourself you've kept hidden because they didn't fit the approved script. But the more you listen, the more you trust, and the more you trust, the more your life begins to align with your true nature rather than the expectations imposed on you. Now let's talk about the role of sexuality in this process, because it's often the most misunderstood and most repressed part of the individuation journey. When your life collapses, your sexual energy doesn't disappear. It transforms. Sometimes it intensifies, as if the life force is reminding you that you're still here, still capable of feeling, still connected to the primal current of existence. Other times it goes dormant, as if all your energy is needed for the inner work of rebuilding. Both are natural, both are part of the process. Jung understood sexuality as more than just physical desire. He saw it as libido, the fundamental creative energy of the psyche, the force that drives all growth, all transformation, all movement toward wholeness. When this energy is repressed, when it's denied or shamed or locked away, it doesn't vanish. It goes underground. It festers. It erupts in compulsive behaviors, in destructive patterns, in symptoms that scream what you refuse to hear. But when this energy is integrated, when it's recognized as sacred, as powerful, as part of your wholeness, it becomes fuel for individuation. It becomes the fire that burns away the false and forges the true. And here's the paradox. The same culture that commodifies sex, that plasters it everywhere, is terrified of conscious sexuality. Conscious sexuality means meeting your desire with awareness. It means asking, what is this longing really about? What am I seeking through this connection? What part of me is calling to be seen, to be held, to be integrated? It means recognizing that the erotic, in its deepest sense, is about union. Not just with another person, but with the disowned parts of yourself. The masculine seeking the feminine seeking the masculine, not out there, but in here, in the inner landscape of your own psyche. Jung called this the conjunctio, the sacred marriage of opposites. It's the alchemical process where what was split becomes whole, where what was at war becomes integrated, where the inner king meets the inner queen, and together they create something new. This isn't metaphor. This is lived experience. When you stop projecting your unmet needs onto others and start recognizing them as invitations to your own wholeness, relationships transform. You stop seeking someone to complete you and start seeking someone to meet you in your completeness. You stop using sexuality as escape and start experiencing it as presence. You stop performing and start embodying. And this changes everything. Because when you're whole within yourself, when you've integrated the shadow, when you've honored both spirit and body, when you've allowed the collapse to clear away the false, you show up differently in the world. You're no longer desperate for approval. You're no longer performing for love. You're no longer hiding parts of yourself to belong. You're just here, fully, authentically, unapologetically, and that presence is magnetic. Not because you're trying to attract anyone, but because authenticity always is. People feel it. They sense when someone has done the work, when someone has walked through the fire and emerged real, and some will be drawn to it. Others will be repelled by it because your authenticity confronts their inauthenticity. Let them go. You're not here to make everyone comfortable. You're here to live your truth. But let's be honest about something. This path is lonely. Not forever, but for stretches. Because as you individuate, as you become more yourself, you'll naturally grow apart from people who knew you as someone else. Friendships that were built on shared dysfunction or mutual avoidance or surface-level connection will fall away. And that hurts. You'll grieve those losses too. But what replaces them slowly is more genuine. Relationships based on authenticity rather than performance. Connections where you can be fully yourself without apology. Community with others who are also doing the work, who understand the struggle, who can hold space for your complexity. These relationships are rare, but they're real, and they're worth the loneliness of the transition. Jung also spoke of the second half of life as fundamentally different from the first. In the first half, you're building identity, career, relationships, status. You're accumulating, you're achieving, you're becoming someone in the eyes of the world. But somewhere around midlife, often triggered by a collapse, the psyche shifts. The questions change. It's no longer, how do I succeed? It's what does my life mean? It's no longer what do others expect of me? It's who am I really? It's no longer how do I get more? It's what truly matters. This is the turn inward. This is the descent into the depths. This is when individuation becomes not optional, but essential. And if you resist it, if you try to keep living by the values of the first half of life, the psyche will force the issue through depression, through illness, through crisis, through collapse, because the self will not be denied. It will push you toward wholeness, whether you're ready or not. So if you're in the collapse right now, consider this. Maybe it's not a failure. Maybe it's an invitation. Maybe your psyche is saying, the old way isn't working anymore. It's time to go deeper. It's time to find out who you really are. And that's terrifying, because you don't know who you'll find. You don't know what you'll have to give up. You don't know what the new life will look like, but you do know this: you can't go back. The collapse has already happened. The only way is through. And through means descent. It means confronting the shadow. It means integrating the opposites. It means honoring the tension. It means listening to the self. It means trusting the process even when it makes no sense. It means being willing to be nobody for a while so you can discover who you actually are. And here's the promise. On the other side of this, if you do the work, if you stay with the process, if you don't rush or numb or flee, there is a life waiting for you that's more real, more alive, more meaningful than anything you've known before. Not easier, not perfect, not free of struggle, but true, yours, whole. And that's worth everything. So begin again, not by reconstructing the past, but by descending into the present, by feeling what you feel, by meeting your shadow, by integrating your sexuality, by honoring your spirit, by listening to the self, by trusting the collapse as the clearing it is, by choosing daily to become who you actually are. This is Jung's quiet map. This is the path of individuation. This is how you rebuild the self, not by returning to what was, but by surrendering to what wants to be born. And in the end, what remains is not the certainty you craved, but the capacity to live without it. To stand in your own presence, grounded in the knowledge that you've faced the worst and survived, that you've descended into the depths and returned with something precious, something real, something that can't be taken from you. This is the gift of collapse. Not the collapse itself, but what it makes possible. The shattering of illusions, the clearing of false foundations. The invitation to build a life based not on external validation or inherited scripts, but on your own inner authority, your own deepest truth. And here's what no one tells you about that authority. It doesn't come from confidence. It comes from humility, from the recognition that you don't have all the answers, that you never will, and that this is not a problem. It comes from the willingness to keep learning, keep growing, keep confronting new edges, new shadows, new contradictions. It comes from the understanding that individuation is not a destination you arrive at, but a relationship you cultivate with the mystery of your own becoming. Every day, you choose it again. Every day, you listen again. Every day, you integrate a little more, release a little more, become a little more whole. And some days you'll fail. Some days you'll retreat into old patterns, into numbing, into performing. Some days the weight of it all will feel unbearable, and you'll wonder if any of this matters, but even those days are part of the process. Even the failures are teaching you something. Even the retreats are gathering energy for the next emergence. So be gentle with yourself, be patient, be willing to be a beginner again and again in the art of being yourself. Because this is the deepest work there is. Not the work of achieving or accumulating or impressing, but the work of becoming real, of integrating shadow and light, of honoring body and spirit, of living in alignment with the self that's been calling you all along, through every crisis, every longing, every moment of collapse. This is Jung's map, not a guarantee, but a guidance, not a formula, but a faith in the process, a trust that the psyche knows what it's doing, even when you don't, a conviction that wholeness is possible, not as perfection, but as integration. So take the map, follow it into the depths, and when you emerge, and you will emerge, you'll carry with you something the world desperately needs. The presence of someone who has done the work. The authenticity of someone who has faced themselves and chosen truth over comfort. The freedom of someone who knows that beginning again, no matter how many times it takes, is always, always worth it. Think of it this way. The collapse you experienced was not random. It was the psyche's way of saying, this path is no longer viable. This version of yourself has run its course, and while it feels like destruction, it's actually protection. Protection from living a life that isn't truly yours. Protection from wasting decades on a script someone else wrote for you. Protection from the slow death of inauthenticity. So honor it. Honor the collapse as the fierce, necessary force it was. And honor yourself for surviving it. For being here, still breathing, still searching, still willing to ask the hard questions. That willingness is everything. Because the truth is, most people never ask. They live their entire lives in the ruins, pretending everything is fine, performing a version of happiness they don't actually feel, numbing the pain with work, distraction, consumption, anything to avoid facing the truth. But you're different. You're here because you want the truth, even when it hurts. You're here because you sense there's more to life than the script you inherited. You're here because something in you refuses to settle for less than wholeness. And that refusal, that sacred dissatisfaction, is the beginning of individuation. It's the spark that ignites the entire process. So tend it, protect it, let it guide you, even when the path is unclear. Because this is your path. No one can walk it for you. No one can tell you exactly what your individuation will look like, because it's unique to you. Jung's map is a guide, not a blueprint. It shows you the terrain, the stages, the pitfalls, the possibilities, but you're the one who has to walk it.